Human activities that contribute to land degradation are almost exclusively derived from unsustainable agricultural activities. In the last 40 years, mismanagement of agricultural land has contributed to the loss of nearly one-third of the world's arable land. Worldwide, the rate of loss of arable land due to agricultural activities perpetuates at more than 12 million hectares per year. Healthy soil is as vital a resource as water, since the food we eat depends equally upon those two resources to grow. Conventionally raising animals in confined, large-scale farms poses many associated problems for the health of our soils. Animals raised on land in high concentrations require large volumes of grain feed that has to be grown elsewhere. Growing these grains requires huge amounts of land and energy, contributes to the exhaustion of soil nutrients, and thus leads to the need for pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. It also results in an excessive buildup of manure. Dispersed evenly throughout a pasture, nutrients found in manure enhance pasture productivity. However, a concentrated buildup of too much can lead to soil nutrient imbalances and water contamination. All of these negative impacts of raising animals on land can be avoided. And actually, when animals are well managed, they can work to enhance the land that they live upon, as well as other agricultural lands that would otherwise be used to grow supplemental grain feed. Land mismanagement is not only about the number of animals on a plot of land. It is also very much about how long these animals are allowed to graze on that land. When either the number of animals or the duration that those animals are allowed to graze is too great for the land to sustain appreciable and healthy vegetation, the land is called overgrazed. When land is overgrazed, plants die off, and with less vegetation, the soil loses the ability to maintain moisture, and nutrient-dense topsoil is carried away in wind and runoff, leaving soil health and nutrient levels to diminish over time. It is far better to avoid overgrazing, since overgrazed lands can take many years to recover naturally. Ideal grazing, then, is allowing the animals to eat just enough grass, but not too much so that the grass will struggle to regrow. Enough foliage must remain on the plant so it can carry out regular photosynthesis to regenerate. If allowed, livestock will eat forages down to the ground. If this is allowed to occur, plants are unable to capture enough solar energy and must draw up on their root reserves to survive. Many perennial plants store nutrients in their roots, so root health is not only essential for nutrient and moisture uptake from the soil, it is also imperative to surviving winter dormancy.
So there's just as much root base underground as there is plant above ground. So when you take that bite, now it's going to kill off roots below ground to put the energy to grow more grass. So if you do that and take another bite before this root has fully recovered, then you're damaging your plant. So we try to take a bite and then leave it. And then once it has good above ground growth, that means that your below ground growth is good. And then it is strong enough and able to sustain another bite.
Whether the land is overgrazed or not depends on how ranchers manage their lands. There are three general forms of grazing. These are continuous grazing, rotational grazing, and management-intensive grazing. Continuous grazing is when animals are allowed to access the entire available pasture. This requires less time and decision-making on the rancher's behalf since they do not decide where the animals will feed. This reduces biodiversity of the plants on a field, and when animals are allowed access to all parts of the pasture at all times, plants are not given sufficient recovery time between bites, and plants die off and biodiversity on a field is reduced. Forage in this situation is usually not enough to support the livestock living there. Thus, supplemental feed often needs to be purchased at the rancher's expense to fill the nutritional gap. Another form of grazing is rotational grazing. This is a system that enables livestock to move between multiple pastures based on the animal's feed requirements and the growth of the forage. This system allows for increased production of forage, more even manure distribution, and allows pasture time to rejuvenate. Land also requires slightly more time from the rancher. The final form of grazing is called management-intensive grazing, wherein large fields are divided into several smaller paddocks, and animals are moved every couple of days. Breaking the pasture into smaller pieces allows pasture in each paddock to have longer time to rest and regrow between each grazing session. When more pasture is given more time to recover, it produces more vegetation throughout the growing season, preserving the health, productivity, and nutrient content of the soil, provides more food to the animals and the most even manure distribution, and reduces the need for costly supplies of supplemental feed. The healthy and biodiverse pasture created using management-intensive grazing can be further enhanced when multiple different species are allowed to move between the same paddocks in succession. The natural behaviors of each species contributes to the land and soil in different ways. Adrian and Dan of Corner Post Meats in Monument, Colorado, implement such a model in their ranch. Cows and sheep, for instance, only graze about 35% of the same forage. Cattle consume larger, more mature grasses and legumes, while sheep prefer weeds, shrubs, forbs, and immature grasses. Co-grazing these two species allows for all the forage in the entire paddock to be equally grazed, and allows the rancher to collect more forage per acre. In multiple species grazing systems, pigs can then follow the sheep and cattle and aerate the soil in their search for grubs and worms. Pigs will disperse the cow and sheep manure, allowing the manure to break down faster. After the pigs, chickens will further disperse and break up manure as they scratch and peck for invertebrates. Chicken manure is high in nitrates, which also naturally fertilizes the soil. As each species passes through a paddock, the vitality of the forage and soil is not damaged but enhanced.
So many people use animals against them or against nature, or that like everything that they do is a liability. We try to look at it as everything could have a benefit. So how do we make it all work for us? Like, oh, that's a patch of weeds. Let's put their hut there. We know that they're going to root there. Oh, that's, less desirable forage. Let's put their waterer or their feed troughs there. And then it's going to get extra trampling or, move these so that we don't overdo it in an area. Like, there's just so much that you can do.
So where does your animal protein come from? Healthy soil is as imperative to our food production system as access to water. We must act collectively to preserve and enhance our agricultural lands for their use by future generations. Ask your rancher how their operations enhance the quality of their soil, forage, and meat. Because quality, sustainability, and responsibility start from the ground up.